Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge. We are getting ever closer to our end of the year hiatus where we're going to take a few weeks off for the holidays and then get right back into things in 2021. I'm your host, as you heard from the intro, Alan Sanders. And while this season 3 isn't looking at a movie a minute at a time, which I would highly recommend you go back and check out seasons 1 and 2, we did have that shift in this COVID year to become a much more guest-driven format. And it has been a lot of fun looking at a person's life rather than a minute at a time, a moment at a time in their lives. And as always, it wouldn't be the Wilder Ride without my Wilder second half, Walt Murray. Walt, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How you doing, buddy?
It has been an interesting 7 days since we last recorded.
Yeah, usually you and I talk just about every day, and I think we've maybe talked a couple of times this week. So I figure you must have been buried in some kind of craziness.
Yeah, it's still the ongoing honeydew list projects, which are always fun. I've got my office almost bare boned at this point in time, and I think to try to avoid getting my computer completely unattached and remove my computer desk and get everything ripped out, I think I can start installing the floors on 2/3 of the room and then just slide my computer and everything onto the part I finished and then finish the rest of the room. So I've been staging this room. I'm nearly done at my my rental house that my two oldest are renting from me. I've got to do a ceiling and some lighting in their quote second movie room, and then I'll be done. So you know what I want for Christmas? Nothing to do.
I thought you were going to say your rental property to burn down. It seems like everybody I talk to who owns rental property, that is like the bane of their existence.
Well, it didn't used to be, but now that, see, when you're just renting to total strangers, you're just like, if you want to do something, it's your dime. Now it's my kids renting. It was supposed to be a win-win where I'm like, hey, I'm going to cut you guys a break. You had this really high rent in the, closer to the Atlanta market when this entire year went, tango uniform on us. I said, tell you what, you can get a much larger place. Yes, it's a little further out from Atlanta, but it's closer to us, which, my wife likes. And we're going to rent it to you for a lot cheaper than we would have rented it to somebody else. And now I turn around and it's costing me more to rent my own kid.
Well, that's just how it works.
Is it?
I think the kids are the world's biggest money pit. Every single 2 weeks, it's like, okay, well, I'm already behind on my budget, because it's always something with the kids. And then if they're if you're their landlord, you're even worse. So,
yeah, well, normally what the landlord is, and this is the way it's supposed to work. Like I keep thinking to myself, I want to be like that old 70s, 80s kind of like slumlord, they call with a legitimate reason, hey, there's a sewage leaking and there's a pipe's broken. And I'm like, well, fix it. Otherwise, get out and I'll find someone else. Instead, it's, hey, I know that we bought the house or we're renting the house as is, but could you drywall a couple of rooms and then put in some hardwood flooring and then maybe some electrical work? And how about a ceiling? And how about paint? Well, tell you what, we'll paint it for you. Is that a fair trade? I'm like, oh, okay, sure.
Sounds great. Yeah, that works out real well for you.
The only thing that's going to be good is down the road when they eventually decide that with all the work I've done and all of the effort and all of the favors we've had them, and they've decided it's still too onerous to be part of a house that is actually attached to us and they decide to leave, I'll at least I'll be able to ask a much bigger asking price because now I've got all these extra rooms downstairs fixed up.
Well, that is nice. And yeah, I was going to say, that's going to happen because they're going to, do things like get married or get jobs in other places or other things that young people tend to do. So you've got a lot to look forward to.
Now, can I tell you something about my two dogs, at least one of them? Because, We're dog.
You're down to 2?
Well, no, I've got 4, but
Oh, okay. I was going to say, what the heck happened?
well, it was a nasty little bug that ran through there.
Left the back door open, and
well, we invited people for a barbecue. We were short on meat, so no, that's horrible. I can't believe I just said that. What the hell's wrong with me?
You're an
I'm
awful
obviously
person.
not in Christmas mood. No, we were gonna have like we normally do sort of an annual Christmas party, and with this year we felt like it doesn't make sense. There's a handful of people we know, no matter what, they're gonna come out. They're not gonna be worried about all this stuff, but we didn't want to put the others that are sort of on the fence, and those folks who would still feel a little odd to be grouped with 60, 70 people, and then we didn't want to be like the family that gets put in the news as a super spreader or some stupidity like that. So
well, since you do the morning news, that would be hilarious.
What would be great is I would be like, and we have a story. No, actually, and I just like you hear Bartow family super spread. Oh no,
I know the people at your station. Mike Garcia would be all over that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I need. Can I get a quote?
This is Mike Garcia. You won't believe what Alan did.
So, what made you decide to break all the rules?
Yes, that's it.
So instead, we're doing kind of like a mini kind of gatherings. We had a game night with just a couple of people, and my wife was like, you know what? Riley, who's our big 85-pound lab, as you know, we affectionately call him Hodor because he is a big, just a harmless lunk, but he's just huge. He loves to nearly molest people when they come over. He gets up in their face, wants to hop up, wants to gyrate a little bit, and it's a little embarrassing to explain that. Well, he's not really doing anything. He just loves you. So my wife's like, take him to the dog park, which we have never done before. So we took Riley and Lucy, who's our husky German Shepherd mix, to this dog park. And there's it's kind of cool because it's separated in like little dogs and big dogs. And so we're on the big dog side, and there's like 7 or 8 other dogs running around. My dogs were like pig in slop. They were like, we get to be off the leash and run. Well, I felt so bad for Riley because we take them for walks, but they're pretty much inside all day long. They lounge, they sleep, they have run of the couch, the bed, the floor. We have dog beds all over. We ran Riley to the point where he stopped chasing the ball and just looked like he was done. And when we got home, he was kind of like tired, but that night he could not hop up in the bed. His muscles wouldn't work. And about 5 o'clock in the morning, I hear, like, what's the matter, buddy? He was, you know how that look, and this is what's going to happen to a lot of folks who may listen to this episode after the first of the year. You know, that feeling and that look of the person who went to the gym after having not worked out for a couple of years, but thinks they can still bench everything that they used to be able to bench 20 years ago.
Oh, no, I don't know anything about that. That's,
no, you don't?
That's why I go to the chiropractor at least once a week.
You know how you realize, oh my God, it hurts to just breathe?
Yes, I'm well aware.
I think Riley was in the dog version of, oh dear Lord, it hurts to breathe. It hurts to move. It hurts to walk. I had to pick him up to bring him up the back steps for the first day.
That's pathetic.
Because he was so broken. Today is the first day he's running around out the backyard like normal. He was able to hop back up on the bed. So I told the wife, I said, all right, you know what? Lesson learned. The short little walks aren't doing it. I'm going to have to make a point of taking them to the dog park a little more often so they can be in a little bit more physical shape. They're not overweight. They're apparently, though, not really in good shape in terms of physicality.
Well, that happens when, just like for us, when we lay around all day and don't do anything, it somehow takes a toll.
No, it was definitely a microcosm. I looked at it and said, okay, so that's me. I need to get out there and move a little bit more too. Because all of this woodwork I'm doing, all the flooring, everything, all of the bending, and it's amazing. It's not like I'm super old, but hitting 50 just recently, walking in, kneeling down, measuring a piece of board, figuring out where I'm going to cut it, go outside, lean down, go to the miter saw, cut it, come back inside, put it in place, hammer it in place, nail it down, go do the next measurement. You figure, well, that's not really all that big a deal. It's not like you're lifting, sacks of concrete or digging ditches. Dude, after like 3 hours, my back, my legs, my thighs, my shoulders, they're like, we're done. Stop. We're not doing this anymore.
Yeah, if I was going to give you a gift for your 50th birthday, I'd have told you know your limits and know that your limits become more and more limiting as time goes by.
I know my limits, but the limits now it's turning into a duration. It's it's you used to be able to do this all day. Now you're going to be able to do this for about 3 hours.
Yeah, when you hit 50, it's all about pace. It's all about pacing yourself.
I need to figure out how to get someone to give me a lot more money so I can pay other people much younger
Yeah,
and more able-bodied to do the stuff that I'm doing.
that's rule
Anyway.
number 2.
It is what it is. So before we bring our guest on, which by the way, I've been looking forward to this one all season long. It's been tough getting this guy's schedule because he is the man of 1,000 voices and is everywhere. But before we do that and introduce our guest, what do you got? What's been going on with you this week? I've kind of monopolized this whole segment.
Well, being a new boat owner and kind of coming to the end of my first season as a boat owner, the good thing is boats are getting a lot less technical, and they're pretty, well, I was going to say dummy proof, but I've managed to do some stupid things in it. But I was kind of trying to get it done for the winter, and we had a couple of really good rains go through. So I'm kind of an idiot, and
Let's just remove the word kinda.
yeah, and I guess you'll probably isolate that quote too and use that again in the future.
Who do you think I am? BK? Put things in the wrong context and try to make a joke out of it? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Oh yeah, that'll never happen.
Ew.
Well, I had put the cover on, and the cover had gotten filled with water. I guess I didn't attach the tie downs very well, and so it was. I mean, and we had gotten a ton of rain over a couple of days' time, so it's all sunken in. So I go out Saturday morning. It's probably 40 degrees, and I'm usually in shorts anyway, which I was, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to get the water out of the boat without just having to take a bucket and dump it all out bucket by bucket. So I get the bright idea that I'm going to get in and kind of like push it and fold it and maneuver the water out. And it's a ton of water. Well, I get up there and I get it almost to where water starts draining out, and it slips out of my hand, and all the water comes flooding back all over me, all over the inside of the boat, which is fine. But it was probably 33-degree water.
Oh my God. And you probably didn't realize how heavy all that water was.
Oh, no. Yeah. Well, I was doing my best. I mean, kind of like you, definitely pushing my limits of being able to hoist all that water out at once and all that. But I was soaked head to toe. I looked like I'd been just dunked. I was soaked, absolutely freezing cold. It was just above freezing. And I'm just standing there, and one of my neighbors leans off his porch, and he's like, "Good job, dummy." I'm like, "All right, I'm out."
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate
I'm
you.
done.
Appreciate you watching me struggle this entire time for your amusement, and
Right.
you got the payoff at the end.
Well, this is the guy who, anytime I'm doing anything yard work wise, he'll come over and watch because he knows something stupid's coming.
Oh my God, we're gonna have to talk about that sometime. The neighbor who just decides, I see somebody out there with tools. I should probably mosey on over and interject myself when they're obviously busy and not wanting company right now.
Well, in his defense, this is the guy that I always call, and I'm like, "Hey, man, how do you do this?" Or,
okay,
I don't know.
At least there's a two-way relationship as opposed to my retiree who decides I'm bored and I want to find out what you're doing today.
No, in the years that we've been there, this guy has by himself reshingled his roof twice. He has added rooms to his house. He has resided the whole house with like the top of the line board. He's rebuilt a car, and he's done something else, and he has a PhD. So like he can make fun of me as much as he wants to. Okay, he's earned it.
He's worthy. All right, I got you.
And see, he kind of looks at me as like the opposite of him. It's like I can do stuff. Walt thinks he can do stuff, and he thinks he can get away with things. So
he's sitting on the deck going, "Oh, it's cute. Walt's trying something again."
Yes, he's like, "Oh no, Walt owns a saw. This is not going to be good."
And then there's that Southern expression, "Oh, bless his heart."
Yeah. Well, and he's the same one who I was running the chainsaw one day, and I had all this growth right along this chain link fence. So I'm cutting and cutting, and then the tooth grabs the fence, and it sounds like just metal shearing against metal. And I thought I thought the chain was going to break and kill me. And so of course the chainsaw stops, and Mike yells, "Hey, watch out for the fence."
Thanks for the hot tip, Captain Obvious.
Yeah, thank you. And literally, I want to insult him by saying thanks, Doc, but he is actually a doctor. He's a PhD, so
He truly is.
it doesn't work. So yeah, it's a little bit of my week. I've managed to almost freeze myself to death, and nothing unusual for me.
Oh, well, you know what? Maybe this is just proving the point you tried to give to me a couple of weeks back. I need to start becoming a little more incompetent, so that way I'm not trusted with so many of these tasks.
Yeah, it's a good lesson to learn.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and shift gears. We've warmed up the audience enough. We've got a guy who knows all about entertaining an audience. He's been involved in radio for a number of years. He's been involved with comedy. He's been involved with, improv. He's done his own podcast for many, many years, a podcast we give shout outs to. He is currently known as the man of 1,000 voices on the von Haessler Doctrine, a radio show heard 9 to noon every single weekday on the #1 station in Atlanta, WSB. Let us bring to our listeners' lounge none other but the one, the only, Tim Andrews.
Hey guys. Hello.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, thanks for having me. How are you?
Wow, how's it feel to be on the flip side of this? Instead of us, looking at a movie like you've joined us a couple of seasons, but this time we're actually getting a chance to interview you.
I actually love it. I don't get to do this very much, so I'm pleased. Usually, I'm like, okay, arranging the interview or whatever. Not arranging it. I mean, Jeff does all that work. Jeff's the producer, I would say, in that aspect. Leave off.
And Jeff's a great guy too. We'll talk about him as we get to the Radio Labyrinth podcast. We actually have him to thank for our two podcasts sort of coming together as one when we first started ours a few years ago, and it's been a fantastic relationship. We've been on your show a couple of times. You and I have gotten together on radio a few times, and it's just been a great relationship that formed thanks to Jeff discovering our show.
Yeah, man. We love your show, and we love being on the show. And we love having you guys on. You guys were talking about this in the intro a little bit, or you mentioned him once or twice. I'd like to talk to BK sometime too.
Oh yeah, no, I think BK would love to talk to you because he's hoping some of your magic will rub off on him and somebody will eventually discover him.
Yeah,
he's hoping to be discovered.
Well, maybe I can help with that since I'm aging out.
No, you do realize he's older than you.
You said you turned 50. When did you turn 50? I forget.
A couple of days before you.
Yeah, that's right. I'm November 4th, so you're just a little bit older than me.
After I was the 18th, so you turned.
So I'm older than you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've still got both of y'all beat. So.
Yeah. Well.
Oh yeah, you an old man.
I'm the geriatric in the categories. Yeah, I'm about to push 53. So
that's not bad. You know what? I tell my wife this all the time. You can't stop chronologically aging. But if you were to put my brain on a meter, it ain't nowhere close to 50.
No, I was going to say maturity wise, I got a long time to go.
Yeah. I'm stuck. Well, I'm not mature at all.
It's why we're not as successful as we need to be. We don't think like we're adults yet.
Right.
That is the truth. Well, Tim, I actually have a bone to pick with Jeff the next time I talk to him. Right around his birthday, he and I went out to lunch together at my favorite pizza place in Atlanta. It's been open 40 years, and then 2 weeks later, they announced they're closing.
Oh, no.
So they just closed last weekend.
What place is this?
Christo's, Corazon Christo's in Marietta. They've been around forever. I actually worked there for a year in high school, and some of the best pizza and gyros in Atlanta.
Man.
And Chris finally closed the doors.
That sucks. It's because of the pandemic, right?
Yeah, because of COVID. They actually interviewed him in the AJC, and he talked about that just they had a catering business that just wasn't going anywhere. Delivery wasn't really going anywhere. Their big meal was lunch, business lunch. Mm-hmm. And with all those businesses around them shutting down and everybody working at home, they just didn't have the traffic. So they tried to talk to the landlord. He wouldn't come down. And so they just shut it down. So it's a shame. It's sad to see those kind of businesses taking a hit in our COVID-driven world right now.
Those seem to be the ones that get hit the most.
Yeah, they really do. They do, and it's a shame. But yeah, Jeff and I got to enjoy it one last time, so that was nice.
That is good. On the flip side of that, I mean, the bright side, we just had a brand new barbecue place open up on Main Street in Tucker. So, I mean, it's not the same, I know, but I'm just
Wait a
saying,
minute. Which one is that?
Pardon?
Someone's getting a chance. Someone's taking a chance.
Yeah. Is that Ford's Barbecue?
Yeah.
I know the brother-in-law of the owner.
Okay.
And I didn't realize you were that close to it because Mike and I are going to plan to go over there in the next couple of Saturdays and have lunch. So I'll give you a call, let you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, totally Ford's Barbecue, that guy can make some serious barbecue.
Yeah, I had the brisket and I didn't even have the fatty kind and it was still like falling off good. But I like the fat.
You got a grill master who knows how to do brisket well. That means they know what they're doing.
Yes.
Yeah. And this guy really does.
I watched this YouTube channel called Sous Vide Everything. And then there's another one, Guga Foods. Are you aware of that one?
No.
He's like a Brazilian barbecue chef and he does every kind of meat. And he does anyway, get to the point is he cooks brisket in a weird way. They covered one with butter and then he dry ages it in the refrigerator and then he takes it out and cooks. It's amazing stuff if you're ever bored. You want to watch a guy cook.
You know what? I have learned so many techniques with my smoker on how to grill or smoke or roast or whatever, thanks to YouTube. So yeah, I'll give it a shot. I love cooking. I love anything to do with like regular foods. I'm not a baker. I don't do like the pies, the cakes, the cookies, but meals, love it. Love being in the kitchen.
Want a little inside information? I can bake and make cookies.
Oh, look at you.
Wow, that's impressive.
I have to make for Christmas. I have to make this thing my grandma used to make. It's called blueberry tort. And it's very involved and it weighs like 10 pounds once it's made. And so
that's a sign that that's a healthy meal.
Yeah. The crust is crushed up walnuts, packed in with sugar. And then you use tons of cream cheese, blueberry pie filling, and whipped cream. So it's a hoot. It's delicious.
Oh, wow.
That sounds awesome.
Yep. Tasty.
Well, you know what? This is the time of year where it's okay to splurge a little and then just because Christmas only happens once a year. Might as well enjoy it.
No, you gotta stay home this year. Stay home. Just you and the pets and your immediate family. Stay home.
Don't have fun. Stop it. So, right. Well, let's set the Wayback Machine. We're gonna jump in the DeLorean, the flux capacitor fluxing. We got to go back to the beginning because it's about you right now instead of us.
Okay.
We want to make sure the audience knows a little bit more about you. You have been involved with either radio or performance or both, as far as I know, most of your life. But when you look back, when did you find yourself really starting down that path of, all right, I'm not going to be the desk jockey. I'm not going to be the banker. I'm not going to be the business exec. I'm going to be the entertainer. How did that start?
That really got started with a couple of friends of mine. In my head, I'm thinking maybe 4th or 5th grade. So we're talking 1979 through 1981 is when that all started coming together. And I had a friend that we would listen to the Muppet Show record. And
yes, I remember that.
Yeah. And there was Sam, the bald eagle, or Sam. Yeah. It is Titwillow. And when you're 9 or 10 or whatever, that's the funniest thing because he's saying the word Titwillow. And then I found my mother's 8-track collection, and she had Richard Pryor. A couple of his 8 tracks. I can't say the names of them. And
why?
But you know what they are.
Just go ahead and beep right now, and we'll assume you said them.
No, I did not say them. And George Carlin's Class Clown. So I would listen to those over and over again. And I really, at a young age, like my mother would let me watch Saturday Night Live with her because she liked to stay up and watch it. So that's, I saw Steve Martin and all those young people, when they were young, the not ready for primetime players. But anyway, so I just consumed. And in the meantime, I found a radio station. And even at a young age, I would listen to talk radio just to hear the voices. And I liked hearing the static. And I thought I would like to do this. And I would make my own little radio shows with a 45. And I had a Panasonic cassette recorder that I put next to the one speaker that the the record player had, and I'd play a 45 and then I'd, record the show. But I had a couple friends in elementary school and middle school. We didn't really have that. We had elementary, junior high, and senior high. But we started doing skits, and that's what we would do on a summer evening. You'd stay up late, and a mailbox would become a camera, and we would do a fake kids show. And we were drawing from Mad Magazine, and at the time, Marvel had a competitor called Crazy, whose mascot was Obnoxio the Clown, and it was a little edgier than Mad Magazine. It was really more for Gen X kids, and it was really filthy and and grubby. If you remember, it was kind of the same thing, but. And then there was Cracked, which I always looked at like, oh, that's not as funny because they're not.
Yeah, Cracked was like the cheap knockoff of Mad.
Yeah, it was like Highlights. It was almost Highlights. It was that milk toast.
Yeah.
But I liked Highlights because I always rooted for Goofus to win, but he never did. So you can see I was in a lot of dentist's office reading Goofus and Gallant and taking in an awful lot of stuff. So excuse me. I try to get away quicker. So I was really shy and introverted in school, but outside of school, I was just a complete nut, and I always wanted to make people laugh. So whether it was, doing gross things, to fend off bullies, you could pick your nose and flick it on a girl, or you could put peas in your nose and shoot them across the cat. I was always getting in trouble for that kind of stuff, and but it's saved a lot of bruises and beatings, things like that. Because I made all those guys laugh. We had jocks. Jocks technically weren't bullies in my high school, but the farm kids, the kids that lived out in the sticks, they were the ones that would bully you. And I mean, nobody, they were like men when they were 12. You know what I mean? Because they were milking cows and, shoveling cow poop and
throwing hay bales. And
they're working class people working on these dairy farms. They got up at 5 a.m. and they worked, and then they came to school, and sometimes they didn't have time to change their boots. So you were sitting in class and you smelled cow poop. So anyway, I hope that answered that question. It was rather verbose.
No, it's good. In fact, I know the kind of kid that comes to they're the first kid in middle school who can like shave, and not because it's fuzz, but because they actually have a full beard, and you're just like, geez, you're like a man. Yeah.
I was a soft, doughy, fat kid who ate a lot of crap and didn't blossom until probably 9th grade. So the first time I took a shower in 7th grade with the other kids was the last time I took a shower because, the difference was amazing because I hadn't reached puberty yet. And here I am in 7th grade. I got to get in the shower. No.
Look, that whole, manscaping phase won't come for another 25 years. You can't look like that back in the late 70s, early 80s.
No. It was like John Holmes versus Bart Simpson, I don't know.
Well, Tim, you talk about
your doodle.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, you were talking about Saturday Night Live and your influences there. Growing up in that same time period, I remember I really don't know why my parents let us stay up and watch it, but we stayed up and watched Saturday Night Live an awful lot, and that whole team of Belushi and Aykroyd and Chevy Chase and all those guys were such an influence on people our age when we were growing up.
Right.
And I still look back at that. I don't think Saturday Night Live has been as funny since then. But the amount of talent they had in that crew, and then of course Steve Martin when he was on, Carlin was on there, of course, as a host from time to time. That was an amazing time to grow up if you were kind of headed the direction that you were because of those influences.
Yeah, it was. And Saturday Night Live, I agree with you to a degree, but I base it only on this, that I'm not even going to count the last couple of years. I'm saying maybe till about 2008. Let's say that, or 2012, whatever. That it always appeals to the younger audience or whatever audience they're trying to appeal to. That cast from 75 to 80 was never, ever topped. Ever. It was because it was the first time and it was the funniest. And then they know that 1980-81 season is terrible, but there are some good moments in it because you had Eddie Murphy, Joe Piscopo, and then you don't remember any. Well, Charles Rocket, Denny Dillon, who went on to be on Dream On, if you watch that show, remember?
Oh, yeah, right.
Gilbert Gottfried and Charles Rocket, of course, he committed suicide. That's his claim to fame. A couple years he did Seppuku or whatever they call that, Harikari. But that cast, out of that cast, Eddie Murphy and Joe Piscopo came out of it. And then in that, there was the Dick Ebersol era of the 80s. That was when I was spending the night every Saturday at Jeff's, and we're staying up and we're watching Saturday Night Live. And then at 1:30, we're watching an R-rated movie and going to sleep. It was comedy and boobs every Saturday night. But that cast, some of those great casts. And then it got to the 90s, and that's when I started dipping away, except for a couple of people like Adam Sandler and Phil Hartman and of course, Chris Farley and David Spade, those guys. And then I'm going to keep rambling. And then around 95 is when that Norm Macdonald, Will Ferrell, that era came in. Mm-hmm. And to me, that is the last era where it was, I can't miss it. Can't miss it. But since probably 2004 or whatever, it's hit or miss for me.
You skipped, and for me, you just skipped the one area what I thought was a pretty good runner-up when you had Billy Crystal.
I mean, the Dick Ebersol, that was a great year.
All those, kind of mid 80s years, I thought they were really, really good. They had clever skits.
I hate when that happens. You ever take one of those ball-peen hammers? Yeah, and you just start whacking yourself.
All did that. How many times did we do that in school? We would have
all of it.
Oh yeah, constantly.
I'm not being defensive. You're being defensive. I don't know why you would say that. I mean, what would give you that impression?
And then obviously we get to the Mike Myers era, and so there are moments here and there where you're like, you saw, but I think those guys that were really good, most of them were able to break away and go do something else. And every now and then some of them tried and failed, but you're right. After really the Will Ferrell and the whole Jeopardy, Celebrity Jeopardy on there, I stopped watching. I just was like, it turned into something that I didn't enjoy anymore.
Well, you still want to say something. I don't want to interrupt you.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I think that for me, it went from you had to watch every minute of every episode.
Yes.
To there being some really funny skits, to there being some bright moments, to now it's just obnoxious.
Well, I was going to say about today. Also, before I got to that, I wanted to say that I also like a couple of people from, more recent years. I like Andy Samberg. Bill Hader, of course, was fantastic. Those guys were good. Fred Armisen, those guys are all really good. But the show to me now is the same as a lot of things that I like or used to like, is that it has an overt political message. They used to be covert with it, or it was a wink and a nod, and you knew where they stood, but it was funny. And even at the time, I was more politically aligned. I don't really have any allegiances now, but growing up and they'd make fun of Reagan, ha ha ha. And but just the last 5 years, it's been nonstop, just beating you over the head with a message and the message and the message. And I'm sorry, I'm going off the rails of entertainment, but to me, that it's hack. It's almost as hack as really bad right-wing comics, that are so overt in their if you're overt in the message, it's not funny. But with this generation, I don't think that matters.
Right. Well, and I think
I think that's
you hit on something important there. I'm sorry, Alan, go ahead.
I was saying, Tim, what you're saying is, we try not to get political, quote unquote, here, but there's nothing wrong with the guests bringing in stuff like that. And I'm with you.
But it's cultural too. I'm saying that everything now is infused with that, and it makes things difficult to enjoy.
And there's also that sense now of hesitation to be, I don't know, edgy, because if you're too edgy, you're going to get fired. You're going to get canceled. The cancel culture exists. Yeah. And you have to kind of walk, well, what's the line I'm supposed to toe versus what would I'd rather be saying?
Right.
Right. And I think it's a difference between smart comedy and just trying to get your message across. And I think that had such a huge influence on us growing up. And I kind of hate to think of the influence that it may be having on, the next 20 years of comedy. But I remember skits like the Gerald Ford skit, where, he hit somebody with a golf ball, so he became kind of the klutz.
Yeah.
And every skit with him in it, Chevy Chase was falling downstairs, knocking stuff over. And it was hilarious, and you could laugh at it no matter what your political ideology was.
Right. The rollover Liberty, and it's a dummy. It's a fake dog. You know what I mean?
Right.
And he didn't put any makeup on. And they sort of did the same thing when Jimmy Carter became president, because they had Dan Aykroyd doing it. He didn't shave his mustache. He just did.
Oh, yeah, right.
He did a characterization, and one of the funniest things is right after he's elected, they're planning the inaugural, and Jimmy Carter, he puts on a Confederate hat and pulls down a map. He goes, "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to." Now, keep in mind, this is after 8 years of Republican rule. They were making fun of a Democrat who was from the South, and then Reagan came along, and they for the first couple of years they made fun of him, and they never ever really got too awful about him.
Well, it was always about being almost a parody, but it was never about or satire, but it never was about meanness.
Right.
And it also never really got into like policy. It was more,
yeah, exactly.
You'd make fun of like Jerry Ford falling down the stairs, or Jimmy Carter being from the South, but you never got into, okay, let's insult half of our potential audience by ripping on a tax cut or something stupid like that.
Or injecting shit. Sorry,
you can
injecting stuff that was
different.
Yeah, well, like if there's a bill that comes along and there's things in it that are contentious to one side, then hammering that, like you said, keep policy out of it. Just do the characterizations, make it funny.
Well, and frankly, that's one of the things I like about your humor on the Von Haessler Doctrine is that when you're doing one of your voices, you're never cutting out half of your audience, no matter what the issue is, because you're making fun of, or you're caricaturing that person, and not all of their followers.
Like, I never thought I did spot on, dead on impersonations. Like, I'm not like a Frank Caliendo, somebody with that ability to just, there are a couple that I can do, like that I can do as easy as breathing, but a lot of them I have to hear the voice and I'm a mimic. But the thing that helped me is when I took those improv classes a couple years ago, and just the years of experience and being less uncomfortable delivering as a performer, is being able to just ad lib and throw stuff out there. Like today, Joe Biden, we played audio, him saying, we're just 100 days, you're going to wear the mask. And I took that and I have a little mask with me and I just mumble things like 1,000 days or 100 masks. You have to wear 100, just going on. And I love that. And that's why I love working with Eric so much, is because he gives you the room to do that.
Come on, man.
So do you think for people who are kind of in that vein of comedy like you are, that the next 4 years potentially, if he is, remains president that long, do you think it's going to be kind of an easy target the whole time?
I'm going to give you my impression of what's going to happen with late night comedy and that sort of thing. Joe Biden will not be made fun of. Kamala Harris will never be made fun of, ever, by anybody. You won't see that done. Maybe you'll see Maya Rudolph or somebody on Saturday Night Live do, a parody of her snarkiness, but they will never be criticized, ever. And that's just an opinion, and I don't think I'm wrong. I think that the news industry is going to suffer because they don't have Trump anymore. So if you don't have Trump anymore, they're going to have to do something. So what's the fear going to be? Why are people going to tune in and wonder, why are people going to be glued to Twitter all day with Trump being gone? Well, they got to find something. And it isn't going to be Joe Biden. I don't even think he's going to last 2 years, but that's my opinion.
No, I think, without going too deep into that line of thinking, I think you're right. I think it's, I'd be shocked if it lasted through the midterms. So,
but I think you're also going to see, Trump can kind of do the same thing Nixon did when he left and say, you're not going to have Donald Trump to beat up on anymore. And
yeah, but unlike Nixon, Trump won't go away.
He will not go away. You are correct.
Kind of like, what is like the oh my God, I can't think of the herpes, it may go down for a while, but eventually you get a flare up.
Yep.
Well, and he's kind of a weird president though, because he was already a pop culture icon-ish, pop culture character before he became president. Where
everybody hates him now. So
everybody hates him now, but it will not be unusual to see him on TV or doing something in entertainment where, somebody like George Bush, he retired to his farm and he mountain bikes and paints pictures of himself in the bathtub.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have that natural connection to pop culture where Trump kind of does, like him or not. So it's going to be weird to see what happens the next couple of years.
Yeah, maybe you'll see him on Mike Huckabee.
Well, let's pull this around because I want to get back to Tim on this rather than just riffing, which is great. But I want to get to, when did you really get to start putting some of these tools that you've already talked about where you are today? But you had to have a starting point. You started, making, fake recordings or pretend shows. You started talking and having your own sort of performances for each other and friends. What was the first gig where you're like, wow, I'm actually moving in the right direction toward maybe a career in radio?
I was doing years and years and years ago. Radio stations used to have budgets that allowed them to have television commercials made for them to air in their local market. And I worked for this company for 3 years called IQTV. It's no longer in Atlanta, but we did commercials for radio stations all over the country, including Atlanta. And in early 2000, 96 Rock had a new program director, wanted a new campaign. And so I went and I met with them and I sat through the editorial because it wasn't a customized, film shoot like we had done in the past with the regular guys. This was just taking other commercials and slapping the 96 Rock logo onto it. I sat with Tim Dukes, was his name, was the program director of 96 Rock. And I talked with him, and while I was doing edits, I was always looking for radio business because I was also in sales. It was a job where you did production and sales. So I was looking at leads. And Tim called me a week later, when everything was done, and he said, "Hey man, you want to meet for lunch?" So I went over to 96 Rock and met him for lunch. And as soon as I got led into the radio station, I was like, "Oh yeah." You know what I mean? If you're into radio, you know that feeling. I'd had that feeling previous because in 96, I got a part-time job working promotions for Z93 that I kept through other full-time jobs. I always maintained this part-time job with Z93, just hanging banners and handing out prizes and stuff. But I wanted to be at a radio station. So, I kept that job. And anyway, so Tim Dukes offered me this job and I got to go there. And I knew right away, I said, I'm going to do this promotions job, but my goal is to, do on-air stuff. Tried to do a couple of air checks. I did a couple of shifts. It had been so long from the first time. I used to be a DJ, and I could run a board and play records and carts and stuff. But this was an all digital board. And my boss said, "Yeah, man, you're going to fill in tonight." And there was so much dead air on 96 Rock that night that it was embarrassing. Thank God they had an emergency tape. I put the emergency tape in. And if you work in radio, you know what that is. So I do impressions of people I've worked with. And when I was a Bob Evans manager and at the Christmas party, they all knew that I did impressions. So that I was the entertainment at the party, and I'm drunk. I'm 25. I'm doing impressions of my boss and other people that worked there.
That's always a good career path.
Definitely.
I can still do those impressions because not really anymore, but when I used to drive north, I'd stop at the old Bob Evans and eat. And the girls would come around. He'd been there for 10, 15 years. Dude, Jim. Jim's been dead for 8 years. All right, I'll do Jim. And, had to walk. Jim. Jim is a guy that I got drunk with on New Year's Eve. And then with the other manager. And at midnight, we shot guns into the air like idiots.
Wow.
It was the three men stag party where we shot guns and played Madden on Sega. Okay. The best New Year's Eve of my life. No one kissed either. So the fall of 2000, Christopher Rude heard me doing some impressions. He goes, "Can you do Al Gore?" And I said, "Yeah, I can do Al Gore." And we recorded these really dirty Al Gore voicemails. I'm like, "Hey, this is Al Gore," and da 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 da. No,
I remember those.
You do?
Yes, I do.
Wow.
I've been listening to 96 Rock since like 1978. So I felt like I went to a funeral when they signed off. So yes, I remember a lot of 96 Rock stuff.
Well, he used me for a couple things. Tim Rhodes asked me to do it. And then they came to me and they knew that I was a Phil Hendry fan. Larry did. Larry and I never really spoke a lot then, but Eric would come into the office and sit and talk, and we became friends, and I got to know the staff of the show. So Larry said, "Why don't you call in as this character? We want to do this character of a guy," and I'm trying to think of his name.
Okay, well, before you get, I know I don't want to derail you, but for the audience that doesn't live in Atlanta,
Larry Wax,
podcasters outside of our geography, this is like the two leads for the regular guys radio show.
Yes, and this is 2000.
Okay,
and this is WKLS Atlanta, and so they wanted me to play a character, and the character's name was. They asked me to come up with the name, so I said his name is Lincoln Hardy. He's a state senator, and he is proposing a bill that all kids, once they reach puberty, have to be photographed in the naked, in the nude, so you could identify them if there's a crash.
I remember something about this.
That is awesome.
I had no idea. I'm at my apartment in Vinings. I'm just playing this character on the phone. And I'm ad-libbing and riffing. And they had sent me some lines, but it clicked. I mean, it really clicked. And I became this guy. And I said, well, listen, and I was arguing with callers. And it was like Phil Hendry, except, Phil does all the voices. This was those two interviewing a fake guy, but still angering the callers. And so we developed, by the way, the switchboard lit up at the State House. And it also lit up at 96 Rock, and they had the media there, and people were freaking out.
Who's this guy that talked about photographing my son's junk at the
Right?
I was going to say, I thought that kind of blew up, and that was the one that got calls to the State House.
Oh yeah, tons of them. And then we did other characters, like I did Terrell from Vine City, who was an African American retired postal worker who was on disability, who would call in and complain to them all the time. I'm not going to do the voice now. And there was another guy that I did named Curtis Washington, who washed cars at James Lofton Hummer of Lithonia, and he worked for Cynthia McKinney. And so all these ridiculous characters. Lincoln Hardy became a guy named Travis Elliott, who was a misogynist. So he was like a wonk or a middleman, or a guy who works for the bureaucracy. He'd always call it, well, women can only drive on Thursdays and Fridays and all sorts of things. So that eventually led to, I left 96 Rock after they got fired and went to Dave FM. And that was the wrong move for me. The regular guys got brought back. So while I'm working at Dave FM on the way to work, I'm pulling over into a parking lot and doing characters for Larry. And I'm not even getting paid for it, but I'm like, this is what I want to do. My boss at the GM at Dave said, go do that. So I did that. And I came in there, I just sat there and I just did voices, and, they gave me the patience and time to develop as a performer on air at 35 years old. Cause usually people get started way before that. So I'm 35, and that was my career change. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
So let me ask this, because there was a period of time though, when the regular guys were then disbanded again.
Yes.
And it did cause, I'm not going to get into the personalities or behind the scenes. I don't want to get anybody's feelings hurt, but it ended up causing a break between the two leads, and Eric kind of started doing his own thing. Well,
okay. So there was the show got fired in the spring of 2004. I believe that's when it was. Yeah, it was. It was 2004, after the Janet Jackson thing and the FCC and all that. They got brought back in 2005, started at WGST, left WGST, went back to 96 Rock in the morning. We got fired in 2006. Those two split up. So Eric said he'd never work with them again. Steve stayed there and did afternoons, I believe, with Tim Rhodes or whatever. Or no, Steve went and worked for the country station. I was unemployed, and then I ended up getting a job at 99X because they had the morning show with Rob Jenners, Leslie Fram, and Sean Demery, who, rest in peace, Sean Demery was a great guy. And the other two are great too, but well, they are. And so I got a job there, and it was so limiting for me. I know that Jenners wanted me on the air more to be comedy, but the people that ran the station were like, no, he's too associated with the regular guys. So I was like, well, why did you hire me? That's why you brought me in here. So one day I'm up in Connecticut, and I'm interviewing for American Comedy Network. I'm like, I want to do this. This is great. I can do voices and I can write. And I was set to take this job and move up to Connecticut. And Larry calls me and says, we're putting the band back together. And I'm like, oh, well, all right. So in 2008, in January of 2008, we started again. So we were on the air until 2013. Eric got fired that fall. 2014 in December, Larry got fired, and then it became what it is today. Just I was still there then.
So you were so you got pulled in at the beginning, and you were the last one to turn the lights off. Yeah,
I was. Steve, they wanted me to be on the show still, I guess, but they had this whole plan of how it was going to be called something else, whatever. It was all negative stuff. So I've gotten past that, but I knew that I was going to get this job at WSB. So my wife, who wasn't my wife at the time, we had just moved in with each other. She said, well, as long as you can work. And I said, I can work. And I found, I let the Rock 100.5 thing go. I started doing podcasts with Eric because I had a non-compete. And I worked at a pizza place. I worked at another pizza place. I worked at Hobnob, which is in Piedmont Park. It's a restaurant. I worked at restaurants. And then I worked at a barbershop. And then I got a part-time job. And then it became what it is today. But that's how much I love radio. Now, if it happened to me tomorrow, I don't know what I'd do.
Right. You know what? I wanted to get that part because there's a lot of people who just feel like, okay, you're gifted. You either have a voice, you have a talent, you end up being in radio, you make $1 million and you're a famous person. And they don't realize how much effort and work and sometimes just being in the right place at the right time or somebody who takes an interest in you to even get to where you are.
Yeah. Well,
it's work.
Yeah. Look, it's tough. For every, Howard Stern, who just signed a new 5-year deal and $120 million a year on Sirius. And for every guy like him, there are 1,000 people in radio who will never even make $100,000 a year, and that's just the nature of the business. First, that has to do with there's less competition. When there's less competition, ad rates can be set. You know how that works. There's less competition because everything merged in the 90s and 2000s. 2 or 3 companies bought everybody up, and then they all went bankrupt, and then they had to get bail. So that's why radio is in the state it is, as far as I'm concerned. And they don't develop anything new. They don't develop talent and stuff like that. So it's on guys like us who love radio and have a passion for it and want to do it to make our own thing, whether that's on a podcast that's successful and then a program director says, I'm going to put you on the air because that podcast is good. It's a whole new ball game. So, us Gen X guys, we have to find a way to adapt. I think the younger people who get into radio will have less of a problem with it.
I wonder that though, because I'm seeing, and it's so hard to tell. You can prognosticate all day long, but one of the things we've talked about with other folks we've brought on over this course of this 3rd season, where we've become more interview driven, is I'm seeing less and less of a move toward individual voices and more of a move toward a collective on the air, where it's more of a group discussion. And then you start losing that one person who's got like their ideas that they're trying to portray. Now it becomes, well, I need to soften my personal ideas because it's now part of a group discussion. I don't get to monologue for 3 hours, but I get to be part of a discussion for 3 hours. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know what that's going to be for talent, but that's how I kind of see things going. And I'm curious because your show is sort of like that. It is a collection of voices with one guy, sort of the host, but it really is a group of people. It's not just one person monologuing for 3 hours.
Right. It is a group of people. And also it's not advocacy radio. So you're not hearing one point of view for 3 hours either. So, but I'll tell you this, just as an aside, I've been listening off and on to Rush Limbaugh since we discovered him one summer. I was working at this radio station in Elmira, New York, and we had ABC satellite. So you had to actually physically dial the satellite responder or whatever the hell it was, the receiver, to get these things, right? There's no internet then. You had to tune the satellite frequencies in. And so we would sit and listen to Rush Limbaugh. We didn't carry it. It wasn't even on in the market, but we could get it over the ABC network. And he had funny bits. And I thought, okay, well, I don't have to listen. I don't have to agree with this guy politically to find him funny. And those bits that he did back then in those days were hilarious. I lost my train of thought.
I was talking about how it's moving toward this collective voices.
Yeah. So we are a collective of voices, but the big difference there is we don't argue with Eric, or we don't offer he's not soliciting different opinions from us. And, if he wants one, he'll ask, but he doesn't want us to throw it out there like it's The View or something. But I get what you're saying. Yeah, the younger audiences are so used to just, like having a bunch of blah, 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 blah. They watch TMZ. That's, quick edits and 20 people blathering about shit that doesn't matter. And there's nothing you can grab onto on TMZ. There's nothing you can grab onto on some wacky morning show that's just talking about the same crap that they talk about on TMZ, only in a less informative or humorous manner. And it's tough. I think it's going to be, I can't listen to it. I guess they can. Younger people.
What I'm seeing is when you mentioned the TMZs, I do see things like The View. I see things like The Five. I see every night. I've stopped watching pretty much any produced nightly news show, but it's a collection of talking heads for 4 or 5 minutes, listening to 7 or 8 different opinions, or 3 or 4 different opinions, or 2 or 3, just depending on how many are in that segment. And it's you get no depth, you get no real discussion. It's really just overview, quick, my bite, your bite, then move to the next thing. And I kind of feel that's no longer my thing. I'm not into just eating cupcakes for dinner. I want a steak. I want I want some substance before I have the fluff.
Well, you get that from Mark Maron, and you get that from Joe Rogan and these guys that have podcasts where they can really get into things without some consultant saying, you need word economy and blah, 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 and less means more or less is more, that ridiculous. Radio programmers must know what they're doing, or maybe they don't. I don't know. But you could take a show like Joe Rogan, and you could take a host who is compelling as he is, or if you don't think he's compelling, but able to conduct an interview, put it on the radio on a daily basis, and you're going to have people glued to that radio station. But no one's doing that now because there are no risk takers anymore. WSB took a risk on our show, and they took a risk on other shows that have seemed to have paid off. So, I do like our programming staff, but I do know that there are places out where the program doesn't even care. He just doesn't want to get yelled at by his boss.
Right. I was going to say WSB tends to be the exception and not the rule.
Yeah, I agree. And that's been the case. I've surprised me because, that's so rare.
Yeah. It's why, and I've mentioned this before with other folks, you talk that feeling you get, and you either have it or you don't. When you walk in the building, when I walk into the building, when I'm filling in, when I've been asked to come in and whatever, I'm like, it's like that scene in Christmas Vacation when Clark Griswold finds the magic tree in the forest. It's like, angels are singing, and I never want to lose that. And it's so weird because I've got other experiences in radio where I've had a program manager say, "We don't care what you think. You're not hired to think. You're hired to tell us what the news is."
Yeah.
But wait a minute.
Yeah.
No
thanks.
So, all right. Well, I want to make sure that we don't monopolize this the entire time about just the show, and we've been having a great conversation. I want to continue to drive. We do have other segments to get to. Let me ask you this, because you are one of you're listed as the man of 1,000 voices. You've kind of touched on voices. You've touched on that you're a mimic more than a, impersonator. But before we kind of move out of the interview piece, I want to chat about, when did you learn to start kind of mimicking, and what is the difference in your mind between being a mimic and being somebody who can actually, imitate the person?
I like that question. Because of the comedy that I've been absorbing since I was 6 or 7, I saw guys like Fred Travellina and Rich Little do these impressions, and that made me laugh. And it still does. I could watch old episodes of their stuff and still laugh at it. In fact, I just watched Rich Little's The Christmas Carol, which is very funny. You can find it on YouTube. W.C. Fields. So I started mimicking them. And I think my grandma laughed, or my grandpa laughed. It was tough to get them to laugh, but I was with them the most when I was a kid. So that's what I would do. I would watch TV and then I would mimic what I saw. So it was the Howard Cosell, but it was someone else's Howard Cosell. And I just kept doing it. And then I would hone it, like in high school. I would do it. You get that if once you're capable of doing something, if you get that reward of making somebody laugh in that instance. Yeah. So even girls who thought I was repulsive because I had greasy hair, zits, and crooked teeth, but I would make them laugh because I do an impersonation of the teacher. I'm like, okay, I may not always have greasy hair and zits and crooked teeth, but I am going to keep working on this because I can make girls laugh and guys. But you make a girl laugh when you're that age and your pants are on, you're doing something right.
Hey, that's still true at 53. Yeah. So,
but and then I got in trouble for I made a student teacher cry, and a male student teacher cry, and then and the main teacher who had he had arms you can't see, but his arms were frozen out in front of him because he had polio as a kid. And he would walk down the hall with 2 coffee cups in his hands, and he'd clomp, 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 and the coffee would spill everywhere. I would do an impression of him physically and his voice, in the class when he wasn't in the room. But anyway, that's beside the point. But that's the kind of stuff I did in high school. And so I just honed it my whole life. But as I was a little kid, it was because my grandma laughed at my Howard Cosell.
You know, what I hear when you do a lot of your voices on the radio, and the way I look at it when you describe yourself as a mimic is you get the speech pattern and the use of words and phrases and then the attitude, and it becomes so close in delivery that even if your voice isn't an exact replica like a Rich Little, it's so great to hear you kind of, it's almost like we know who you're playing without being so accurate that we can kind of still laugh even more because it's funny. Like you've created almost like a Sid Marty Krofft version of that person.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you can still be Jimmy Carter with a mustache, and we know who you're going for.
Right. Yeah, but that's a very good compliment. Or a very nice compliment. Thank you. That's given the room to explore a character like Joe Biden for me. Joe Biden for me, I look at him and I see him. That's not Joe Biden that I knew when I was younger. That's not Joe Biden from 20 years ago. That's not Joe Biden from the 80s when I was like, oh, he'd probably be a good president. And I thought that back then. This is 1988 when he ran the first time. But I look at him now, I'm like, that is an old man that's being used by somebody for an agenda. Yeah. That's in my crazy, I don't even think it's conspiratorial. But anyway, that's my opinion, and I'll shut up. But
I want to make sure the audience knows you do an equal amount of Donald Trump, or have been for the last 7 years.
Last 5 years, and making fun of him, but not mean-spirited because I don't hate him. You know what I mean?
The best is when you're riffing at one point and it sounds like, okay, you're sort of mocking the president, then you'll mock Joe Biden, then you'll like support the president, then you'll support Joe Biden. And
I don't hate Joe Biden. I want the country to be great.
Of Saturday Night Live, where you can riff either way because it's funny, and you're not trying to make the audience hate the person that you're making fun of or mimicking.
Yeah, I don't hate him, but I do think people need to pay attention to the fact that he doesn't get all his marbles.
Yeah, but how is that different from any other politician?
Oh, that's true.
Well, and I have to say, Tim, there have been a couple times you've tweeted stuff, and I'm like, "Oh, come on, Tim," and then I'm like, "Well, he is right," but I just don't like to hear it.
What do you mean, like?
Damn you, fairness!
No, I don't. I'm trying not to do that on Twitter anymore because for a long time I was shadow banned because I was just being a douche. But
no, you posted, you tweeted something at some politician made some dumb statement, and you called him on it. And I don't remember what it was, but I just remember initially reacting and going, it's kind of one of those I don't want that to be true kind of reactions.
Oh yeah.
And then I was like, no, it's true. It is true.
I don't need to be a political person on Twitter. I don't, that's all it is now. And by the way, there's only one side that's acceptable, and everybody knows that. I mean, you can say that as a liberal, I still consider myself to be a liberal person, and I can look at Twitter and go, yeah, that ain't liberal, because keeping one voice silent is not a liberal thought. So I'll leave you with that.
Yeah. No, that's a great discussion for another day. And I know we're getting short on your time. You are a busy individual. You are involved with a radio show 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. You have a podcast we haven't even had a chance to touch on, and I want to kind of
come on again.
I do want to at least promote that, because we do pitch you guys, and you recently hit the podcast magazine Hot 50.
Yeah.
And so
thanks to you guys.
Talk about. No, you're welcome. I don't know if it was just us, but I'm sure a lot of your listeners are followers on our podcast as well. And so whenever we give your shout outs and tell people use the website once a day, go out and vote, I'm sure you've got just as many folks that are listening to us that listen to you are doing it for both our respective shows. But I know you're getting short, but can you give us a couple minutes on Radio Labyrinth? And then I want to make sure we end with how do they get in touch with you? If they do want to follow you on social media, how do they follow the podcast, Radio Labyrinth? How do they listen to the packaged von Haessler Doctrine? Because I want people that are experiencing you for the very first time right now to know how to kind of reach out and learn more about you. Take it from the podcast first. Radio Labyrinth.
Radio Labyrinth is a podcast that Ira Malkin met with me right after I was let go from Rock 100.5. And he said, I have this idea for a podcast. I knew Ira through Eric, and he'd worked in radio before. So we got together and we, kind of let's do a pop culture podcast. Ira was already doing one. He had his own little network that he had started. And we talked about it. And I said, this is a good idea. I think I'm going to do this. And I brought Jeff in. And Stephanie and I have known each other for a long time. She was a contestant in a breast reduction contest or something. I don't know. She came in. I don't know what it was. It had something to do with her boobs. And it was.
What she said was that you guys said anybody with big boobs isn't smart.
Okay. Yeah, that's what it was. And she proved Larry wrong. And then whatever. But I've known her for a long time, and I knew that she had done a lot of comedy, and she's a very funny person. She's a very, very talented, funny person. And I said, hey, do you want to do some segments? And then after a couple of weeks, she's like, why don't you just have me on the show instead of doing these fucking segments? I'm like, okay, yeah, let's do it. I may have said that. I don't want to put the F word in somebody's mouth, and you may want to bleep that. So we gelled, man. And for a while, man, we were really, really on fire. And then I get a little meticulous, or I want to change this or that. You know how it is. We've been doing this is a 5th year, almost the 6th year. And just, talking about pop culture, movies, and occasionally having guests that Jeff goes out and gets for us, like W. Earl Brown or Johnny Brennan from the Jerky Boys, and so many more. Recently, this year has been a challenge, and it's tough, and I get stressed out, and just like everybody else, I work in radio and my life's easy. No, I still get challenged and angry and ridiculously spastic over stupid things. But to make this long story short, the last couple of weeks have gone back to the basics of just talking a little bit about our lives, talking about what we watch, recommending shows without spoiling them, and talking about, some cool topics. So this week we have rejected Christmas toys over the years from an article that we found. And then I made up a couple of my own that are really, really, really offensive and or ridiculous. So that's kind of what we want to do. And we do a game every week now called Rad Libs, play on radio, and Mad Libs, Raid Libs, or whatever. So it's like Mad Libs but I cut things out and I do it as either the troll, and this week I did it as Bing Trollsby, Bing Cosby. So
it is a great podcast. It is really at its core a Gen Xer kind of
absolutely
background, and it's great for Gen Xers because a lot of the stuff you can reference and remember. You bring up, but you also hit the modern. You'll talk about movies that are coming out now, shows that are out now, and actually was an influence for us to say, that's kind of cool to give the audience that listens to us a segment, and we do that with our own here show where we say, hey, here's what we've been watching. You might like it, you might not. We don't go to quite the maybe as in depth as you guys do, but we just kind of like to leave the audience with what are we watching, what are we listening to, and what are we reading? Because you never know, we might be able to turn somebody onto a show or onto a series or an album, and why not? Because the thing about the podcast world that's different than radio is I think there is that a sense of cooperation. We don't feel necessarily in competition for ad buy or ad share or market share. I think a lot more of a cooperative sort of organic feel in the podcast world, and I kind of like that.
Yeah, I love it. I love the freedom of it. And, I had toyed with at a time going to a corporate platform with Radio Labyrinth, but it never panned out. And I'm kind of glad it didn't, because I like the freedom. I like that it's mine. I mean, it's all of ours, but you know what I mean? It's something that belongs to us.
Yeah, but you're not afraid to say another podcast on your show. You're not afraid.
I know. Yeah, I don't say Q because they might write that down. Whatever. I know what you're talking about. That old radio. Hey, don't say their name. Oh, yeah, blow me.
Well, Tim, very quickly, for folks who do want to listen, who do want to follow, who want to learn a little bit more about you, give us the your Reader's Digest. Where can they find you? Where can they find the shows?
We'd love it if you'd go to radiolabyrinthpodcast.com. Oh, no. Radiolabyrinthpodcast.com, or go to youtube.com/radiolabyrinthpodcasts. Then you can watch us. You can see some of the shows. You can find Radio Labyrinth on any of the platforms that are out there. We're on Spotify, Amazon, Google, of course, Apple, all of them. So you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, just Radio Labyrinth. And from there, you can find all the social media. We're on Twitter, radio, but it's convoluted. We're on Facebook too. I would go to facebook.com/Radio Labyrinth. And if you want to hear me on the radio, I'm on Monday through Friday, the Von Haessler Doctrine, which is you can listen to it live on the WSB radio app, or you can listen to the podcast on any of your podcatchers, because we podcast the show every day.
Tim, I know it's a busy day for you, and to carve out time not only for radio but for your podcast itself, and then to come on and be interviewed with us. I want to say thank you so much for being able to be one of our guests as we wrap up and wind down the season. And I know I want to wish you and yours a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Hey, man, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to both of you guys. And I'll come on anytime. I had a lot of fun, man, just riffing. This was great.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And, it's kind of cool having been a listener to pretty much all the shows that you've been on in Atlanta and being able to hear you develop that podcast. I don't listen every week, but I pretty much, at least a couple times a month. And it is a great podcast. I hope that everybody will check that out. And I think everybody will enjoy it as much as we do. But thank you again for coming on. Merry Christmas. Tell your wife thank you. We take a lot of your time whenever you hang around us. So
he's out of town, so it's all good.
Oh, good.
That's why he wants to go. He's got like freedom.
No, I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to go to
watch TV.
Gargle salt water and go to bed.
All right, buddy, man. Thank you.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Tim,
for having me on.
Now that we've let the guest out the back door to their limo to go on to bigger, better parties while we're still working, let's move on to the next segment, a segment we like to call Bring Out Your Dead.
Well, this week we've got an interesting one, Alan. And, we had talked about a couple weeks ago that there was somebody who wrote their own obituary. We've got another one of those, and this one is really funny. She is Dr. Kay Hagestad, I believe is how you pronounce her last name. She is actually a doctor and an oncologist, and she died of cancer. So the irony was not lost on her, and she has a great obituary she's left for us. She's from Madison, Wisconsin. Kay Ann Hagestad, age 72, bought the farm, is no more, and has ceased to be, left the world, is bereft of life, gave up the ghost, kicked the bucket. Murio si fist finini. Whatever that is. It's French, I guess. She died on Friday, January 13th, after a wimpy non-battle with multiple melanoma, a nasty bone marrow cancer, after almost 2 years from the date of the diagnosis. No one should say she fought a courageous battle, because she did not. Unlike most folks, she complained all the way. What a whiner. She was ready to quit treatment many times, but her family pushed her to continue, which was good, since she then had time to have parties and say goodbye to friends and relatives. So remember, she wrote this herself. She was born September 18th, 1944, a fact which she was asked 10 times or more per day by medical people. Many said she did not look that old, and no, she did not dye her hair when she at one point had some, except for occasional highlights. You can ask Jody, her hairdresser. Her parents were John and Augusta Pulvermecher Hagestad. She was born and raised in Madison, Wisconsin, except for 1 year as an intern at St. Paul, Minnesota, and 2 years on the Navajo Reservation in Gallup, New Mexico, where she taught medics and delivered lots of new Navajos and a few Zuni natives. I guess she was working in the Indian villages there. She went to medical school at UM, and the two best things about med school were finding her husband, Paul, in the pathology lab and marrying him a year later, and being taught how to do proper physical examinations by William Middleton, who was her escort at the med school graduation. She even wore a dress for that occasion. After finishing a sometimes stormy family practice residency, she and her husband, Dr. Daniel Barry, worked for the Monona Grove Clinic, and then a few years later, the three of them, plus their manager, Alice Soley, built, stocked, and opened the Woodford Clinic. The clinic has now grown to 2 offices. She was saved by her volunteer work. She was a classroom assistant and tutor in algebra in Senate Middle School for several years, and she was on the national board of PFLAG, whatever that is. She did talks for residents at the Astor Assisted Living, a bit of stand-up, and a bit of medicine monthly for 5 years. She got more out of it than they did, and made new wonderful friends. She also played volleyball, She played 6 to 10 hours per week as long as she was able for the last 8 years of her life. Like an addiction, last playing on December 16th, shortly before her death. She made great friends through the sport. She tried to learn Spanish for 12 years, achieving the ability to order beer and find the bathroom. Her classmates became great friends. Kay and Paul were married for 48 years and have 2 wonderful kids. They both live in Madison and 2 lovely granddaughters. Paul was the best husband in the world, really. She is also survived by an excellent sister, a sister-in-law, and by dozens of uncles, aunts, cousins, nieces, nephews all over the U.S. and Norway, and some out-of-the-world friends who supported her through the final months. A celebration of life was held May of 2015, a bit prematurely, and she is sorry if you missed it. She said it was the very best party she ever attended. A second celebration was held September of 2016, and that was as good as the first one. She will, however, miss the third one since she's now dead. She had a great life and wants people not to grieve, in case anyone would. Grieving won't bring her back, and so what is the point? Just makes you feel bad. And she had a t-shirt that says, "I know what is right for everyone," and she really did. She wanted to express her gratitude to the nurses and and Dr. Dirk Neuninghoff for making the melanoma diagnosis early. And then she goes through a long list of people there. The family would like to invite colleagues, friends, and family to gather and remember Kay on Wednesday at the Door Creek Golf Course. Kay lived a remarkable life, and the stories should be shared and the tales told. Send the stories to, and they give you an email address to share it. I just really liked this obit. It wasn't hugely funny, but I really liked the way she approached her own death, and in fact had 2 wakes before she died. So, or 2 going away parties, I guess, before she even died.
That's,
So,
it's like she said, at some point, you can't stop it from happening. You might as well embrace it and go out with, on your terms.
Well, yeah, and this is a person who every single thing she said in here was, "Oh, and I made a bunch of great friends while I was doing this."
Yeah. No, that was good.
That's a really neat reminder this time of year. Just savor life.
Savor the moment. I'm a big fan of the updated phrase. You hear everybody always go, YOLO, you only live once. Well, no, you live every day. You only die once. You got to decide how you want to live each day.
That's exactly right. Right.
I like these. It's great when you find, the cancer of society, right? And the family member that everyone hated, and those are always funny. When you find someone like this, it's equally as compelling, and I love when you do it.
Yeah, and for hers, knowing that she wrote it and that she included all that crazy stuff that she was able to do in life, and she just sounds like one of those people that you really wanted to be around.
Yeah, very cool. Excellent. All right, well, let's roll right into our news segment. Everybody loves this one. You know what we call it.
It's no bullshit.
Walt, I believe you have the first story.
Well, I do. And, we try to stay away from politics, right? But it has really just gotten to where it permeates everything. So I'm going to read this one political news article. Please forgive me. This is from NPR.org. Voter fraud ruffles New England Bird of the Year competition.
Oh, no.
It's terrible news, folks. Evidence of election rigging has roiled the New Zealand Bird of the Year competition after a case of ballot box stuffing has threatened to derail the avian democracy. Suspicions began when organizers received more than 1,500 votes sent from the same email address early Monday.
Wait, this sounds vaguely familiar.
It does sound vaguely familiar, doesn't it? Each vote was in favor of the little spotted kiwi Poopa-Poopa-Coo. According to a statement from Forest and Bird, a conservation organization that runs the election. This is an amazing bird. It deserves all the support, but unfortunately, these votes had to be disallowed, and they've been taken out of the competition, Forest and Bird spokeswoman Laura Keon told NPR Weekend Edition, the annual event is more than just a bird popularity contest. The conservation group Forest and Bird runs the election-based competition to help raise awareness about New Zealand's native bird species, many of which are endangered. Quote, I can only assume that people will get really excited about a New Zealand native bird, she said, reasoning why someone would want to cheat. We are a land of birds, and we have some of the most amazing and unique species. The race isn't over yet. Voting closes Sunday, which unfortunately for us, it was last Sunday. But Keon said the disqualification immediately lifted one species legitimately to top billing. The kakakopo, a rare nocturnal bird known for its owlish beak and yellow-green coloring, and the only flightless parrot in the world. As of Friday, the Antipodean albatross, a critically endangered seabird, had swooped to the top of the leaderboard. Prime Minister Ardern, however, threw her support behind the black parrot again this year, Keon reported. The hee-hee, also known as the stitch bird, earned an official endorsement from a sex toy retailer. The adult toy megastore extolled the polyamorous bird, which boasts unusually large testicles and engages in face-to-face mating as a leader of the sex positivity movement among songbirds. So we're bringing every crazy thing we can into this. Despite the alleged fraud, the littlest kiwi still has a shot at the crown if it picks up enough votes. After all, the underdog species once made a stunning comeback after mainland extinction. If you really love the kiwi poopa-poopa-coo...
Actually, I just like you saying it.
I'm doing my best on that one. Get out and campaign for I'm going to read that sentence again. If you really love the kiwi poopa-poopa-coo, get out and campaign for them in Bird of the Year. We don't want to see any more cheating, the Bird's campaign manager Emma Rawson said. As New Zealand's national emblem, little spotted kiwi represents New Zealanders' values of democracy, fairness, equality, and honesty.
It's no bullshit.
That is priceless.
So there's our politics for the week.
Wow. Well, remember when we got into politics not that long ago about the town that elects a dog for their mayor?
Yes.
And then there was a story from Russia about the guy who felt bad being the only one running and fixing the election, so he convinced the maid to run and she beat him.
Yeah, we've had some good political stories so far this year.
Awesome. I love that. That is fantastic. I love the fact that some email address tried to ballot stuff for one bird from 1,500 entries from one email address.
You really have to love that bird to vote 1,500 times all in one day.
That's a passion.
That is a passion.
Or actually, it's somebody who probably wrote a bot routine and it was just constantly just in a loop, emailing, you know?
Yes. Yeah, it had to be.
Well, I've got an odd news science story here. You ready?
Fire away.
So according to the headline, baby born at 27 years of age, just 18 months younger than mom.
Oh, okay.
Does that have your attention?
That is interesting.
So let's dive into this story. Molly Everett Gibson is known as a miracle baby, as she was born from an embryo that was frozen in October of 1992.
Wow.
Molly was born less than 2 years after her mother Tina, who was born technically in April of 1991. So think about it. The mom who just gave birth to this embryo was 18 months old when the egg was frozen for the first time.
That is crazy.
Well, and again, the article written here as though I didn't explain it. It says, "Are you confused?" Well, we'll explain it. Well, I just did. But Molly was technically 27 years old when she was born, making her just 18 months younger than her mom. Miracle Molly broke the previous record of Emma Wren, her sister, who spent 24 years as an embryo on ice before she was born in November of 2017. Both full genetic embryos were transferred to Tina's uterus 3 years apart after being frozen at the same time. Now, Tina said it's hard to wrap your head around it, but as far as we're concerned, Molly is our little miracle. According to the University of Tennessee Preston Medical Library, Molly enters the history books as the longest frozen embryo known to result in a live birth.
Wow.
Quote, it was very rewarding for me to see an embryo that was frozen years ago result in the birth of a lovely baby. I felt honored to be part of the process. That was from the university. Couple Tina and husband Benjamin have been married for 10 years and previously fostered children before considering traditional adoption. It wasn't until early 2017 that Tina's parents told her about the possibility of conceiving with a donor embryo. Her parents shared that there was a nonprofit organization aimed at helping women conceive that way. They weren't interested at first, but then later admitted that they couldn't get it out of their heads. When they first visited NEDC, they were presented with profiles of around 300 strangers who donated spare embryos following IVF treatments. Tina shared that we weren't picky, we just wanted a baby. They narrowed their choices to couples who had donated that were short in stature and then looked into their health backgrounds. When she first transferred the embryo, Tina was amazed to find out that the embryo had been frozen for 24 years. When Tina and Benjamin decided to have a sibling for Emma, it was a no-brainer. They just went to the same donor of that same group of embryos. The doctor who supervised the delicate thawing process for both said that as long as embryos are maintained correctly in the liquid nitrogen solution, which stores them at negative 396 degrees, technically those eggs should be good indefinitely.
It's no bullshit.
So not a silly story, but I thought kind of a wild story that technically mom is only 18 months older than the child that she just bore.
That is crazy. Wow. Okay, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I love science. And when I hear stories like this, where when you think about it, way back in 1991, somebody decided to donate eggs and they just sat there. And now it's a life a couple that couldn't conceive naturally, that really wanted to have a child, was able to have one thanks to somebody 27 years ago donating an egg.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
And for all the foster parents out there, which by the way, you were involved with that, weren't you, with foster before?
We were, yeah. Actually, we were foster parents for about 3 years and adopted our oldest two daughters out of foster care.
So I figured, that kind of touched close to your story and your background, and I thought you would enjoy that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, keeping with our serious theme.
Don't get me wrong. We're going to go completely the opposite direction with story 2 for me.
Yeah, Breitbart.com has a great article. Colorado outhouse named America's best public restroom.
I didn't know they had a category for staff.
I had no idea. This is news to me. In Minturn, Colorado, November 18th, a small town in Colorado was recently awarded the honor of being home to America's best public restroom. A pair of outhouses designed to look like a passage into a mine in the town of Miniature beat out 9 other finalists to be named the winner of Cintas America's Best Restroom Award. Cintas annually compiles a list of the nation's best bathrooms based on a set of criteria including cleanliness, visual appeal, innovation, functionality, and unique design elements. The list of 10 finalists is then put to a national vote to determine the winner. As the 2015 contestant winner, the town of Miniature is set to receive $2,500 worth of restroom services provided by Cintas.
Wow.
The restrooms are made of 320 fabricated wood pieces to feature turquoise walls and steel butterflies on the ceiling. Project manager Janet Hawkinson expressed gratitude on behalf of the town for having their work recognized. Making the humble public restroom into functional art was both a design challenge and a joy, she said. We are gratified to be recognized for achieving that and for creating a project that reflects the uniqueness of the community. The town of Minturn employed an extensive campaign for the restroom by creating a Facebook page, printing posters, and even moving the town's annual trick-or-treat event from town halls to the site of the restroom. Mayor Hawkeye Flannery expressed pride in his town for their accomplishment at a public award ceremony. It is great to be recognized as a number one town and the number two business and have the finest public restrooms in the country, Flaherty said.
It's no bullshit.
So there you have it. If you gotta go to Colorado and find the greatest bathrooms in the country.
That is amazing. I had no idea that there was such a battle. You had 9 other competitors for the best public restroom. Wow.
No, I think I've been in some of the worst public restrooms, but I would doubt I've ever been in the best.
Yes. Oh, I've been in a couple of real winners. Like,
Yeah,
it's one that's really especially touching to your heart when you can't wait to get out.
right. I was going to say, if you spend much time road tripping like I have, you definitely have found the worst in the country.
All right. Well, let's go to our final news story. And this is great for a part of Namibia's Southwest African People Organization. They have a new elected leader. And I thought this is a great feel-good story. The man's name is Yuyu Ona. Said, as a child, I saw it as a totally normal name, said Adolf Hitler Unonona. He was given that name by his father.
Oh my gosh.
Let me say that again. As a child, I saw it as a totally normal name, said Adolf Hitler Uyunona.
Wow.
The Southwest African country Namibia has a new leader, and it is Adolf Hitler.
Wrong, sir. Wrong.
Okay. Wow.
Now, he did go out of his way to let everyone know he has no plans to take over the world. Well, it's good to know. Good
Hope not.
campaign to run on. I may have the name. I'm not here to take over the world.
I think you would have to pretty much announce that everywhere you ever go.
The fact that I didn't hear this in the news is just amazing to me, because this happened in this year. This back in November the 27th. The country held the election in which Uyunona won 1,196 votes over his opponent, Abner Mombala of the Independent Patriots for Change Party. Umpunjata is a Namibian northern Ashana region and was formerly a German colony from 1884 to 1915. A name like Adolf would not have been uncommon based on that history. Uyunona shared that his father picked the unorthodox name for him and that he was likely unaware of the infamous Adolf Hitler and his role that he played in history. As a child, I saw it as a totally normal name, he said. It wasn't until I was growing up that I realized this man wanted to subjugate the world. I have nothing to do with any of those things. Now, his wife does call him Adolf, and he commonly went by Adolf Uyunona in public. Hitler remains his middle name and on any and all official documents he has, making it far too much work to change it. Because of his name, of course, Uyunona's win quickly went viral. In the year of 2020, a man taking office by the name of Adolf Hitler is just something you cannot not talk about and share.
It's amazing. It's astounding. But it's no bullshit.
Why don't you change your name?
Well, like he said, he's been so long with it, it felt like it'd be too much work to go and change it.
I still ask the same question. Is there any amount of work that is too much to get that name changed?
I would say no, but hey, 2020 keeps on serving him up, doesn't it? Adolf Hitler wins an election in Namibia.
That is absolutely crazy.
So,
I mean, even just having that name would be enough for me to vote against him, no matter how much I agreed with whatever he believed.
Isn't that crazy? And yet he did win. He must have had one heck of a platform.
Yeah, must have. Or he just scared everybody into voting for him.
They all want to work on his team. Remember, we voted for you. Wait,
Hey.
same team, right?
Yeah, we're with you. Wow.
You like us, right? Because we like you.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that is really mind-blowing. I mean, it's 2020. That's too... And I wonder what his parents were thinking.
Well, like it said there in the article, his dad probably was aware of the name of a famous German leader and for whatever reason didn't know the true depth of what that man tried to pull.
Amazing.
Just think about it. We live in an era where there are still parts of this world that may not have that kind of command of or access to world history.
Yeah, I know some of my kids' friends are that way.
Yes, and they all go to public schools here in the United States.
Yes, that's sadly the truth.
All right, well, let's get back on the entertainment train now, and let's get into some of the things that we are watching, reading, or listening to. And Walt, it's going to be the two of us. Our guest had to take off, busy broadcast week for him. So it's just the two of us, you and I. What do you got? What are you watching?
Well, I am struggling my way through season 4 of Enterprise. I don't know if I'm going to make it. I know there are a couple of good episodes left. Yeah, you started strong
with it, and now you're starting to say it's not holding up.
You get season 3 to me kind of drags. It's a tough season to get through. Season 4 is a bit better, but I think binging it, I think I need to step away for a little bit and come back. And those last 8 or 10 episodes will probably be a lot better. I also started watching The Boys. I think I told you a couple weeks ago.
Yeah,
last week.
What do you think?
I'm into season 2 now, and it's great. So I'm right at the end of season 1. Sorry. So yeah, I've binged through that this week. It is a great show. Now it's not safe for kids. Not safe for work. It is. But it is really good. It's entertaining, well written. The acting's great. They touch on some great topics, and so I'm really enjoying that. And then the third thing is I'm about to start, once I wrap up The Boys, I think I'm going to jump in Drunk History. Have you seen that before?
No.
So it's a show that was on Comedy Central. I think they just wrapped it up last year, but they basically get comedians and actors and they get drunk and tell stories about history while people act out their version of it. So as they're getting more and more drunk, of course, the stories are getting more and more outlandish. And so then the actors are acting that out. So it's pretty funny, the episodes that I've caught here and there, but I noticed it is on Netflix. So I think I'm going to pick that up and plow through that. It's always been highly rated. A lot of people recommended it. And like I said, the episodes that I have seen are pretty good.
Excellent. I'm going to check that out. I'm always enjoy talk about, or at least a show that centers around some good adult beverage. And if they can make it funny at the same time, why not?
Absolutely. So, and I think that's what you can get. I need something a little light, I think.
All right. Well, for me, this week has been so busy with a lot of the work we talked about that I've been working on at the beginning of the episode today. I will tell you, I will always make room. I don't care what I'm doing. I don't care how late it is. The Mandalorian season 2 continues to deliver stellar episode after episode. This latest one directed by Robert Rodriguez. A lot of action. Spoiler, we get a character back from Return of the Jedi, shows back up, wants his armor, but now he feels like he has a debt, and now it's cool that the Mandalorian looks like has a couple of partners to help try to get Grogu back from what looks like a splinter of the remaining empires. The threads, the strands, where they're going with it is fantastic.
Now you've watched the Star Wars animated series, right?
Not 1 second of it.
I haven't either. So a couple of my friends who have watched it, they keep picking up on things in the Mandalorian that I don't pick up. But I will tell you, every single week that show just gets better and better.
Well, it makes sense that Dave Filoni, who's was behind a lot of the animated work, and that's how they brought him over because of his just encyclopedic knowledge of Star Wars, would obviously continue to pull on threads of some existing lore that is, I guess, part of the canon of the Star Wars universe. And he is doing it in such a way where he's not hitting you over the head. You don't have to know it. You don't feel like you're being left behind. And yet it's still a Star Wars based story. It's entertaining. It's good. And you're learning about, okay, so what did happen after the fall of the Empire? You don't just immediately have everything disband when you've got ships across the universe, all these different systems. There could be admirals who decide, well, you know what? I've got my own fleet now. I'm going to do my own thing. I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah, it really is amazing. And it's interesting to think about when you have that kind of huge government that's even touching the outer rim and it collapses. Uh it is an immense collapse. And so this is really just a great take on the whole universe.
And they're doing such a good job of not rushing. When I look back at season one, I was and you remember me saying the first episode, I was like, nothing really original. They're playing it safe. We've seen this before. We know that kind of trope of the lone gunman who goes to the bar, then he's going to get picked on by the random stranger, and he's going to show us what a badass he is. I mean, I said, I hope they get, and that was basically just to say, hey, look, we want you to at least watch the whole episode and understand where we're starting. And it has just been a rocket ship from there.
It has, and you really like the Mandalorian from the beginning because he's a tough guy. He takes care of business, but now you're getting to like him more because he is good.
Well, he's sort of like the Han Solo character where, yeah, he's done some things that you might say, okay, you're a bounty hunter. You do things that might be kind of shady, but you've got a moral center that you're not willing to cross.
That's right. And he has a real sense of duty. He also has really grown very close to Grogu, and which is Baby Yoda, aka Baby Yoda. And so that relationship's pretty neat. You see, him kind of taking on that fatherly role with Grogu. And Grogu's great. That could be a real cheesy character, but they have done a fantastic job with Baby Yoda, making him very, very likable and very believable.
Yeah. I think somehow there are threads of the Marvel Cinematic Universe here where, remember when Groot had to be grown back as a little plant, and they did such a great job with a baby Groot. And my worry was, okay, we saw adult Groot. We see baby Groot's cute and does some of the things, but how do you handle an adolescent Groot? And they managed to pull that off in the MCU. I think Jon Favreau is going to pull on that. It'd be interesting as we go on season after season. Do we see baby Grogu, turn into an adolescent?
And do we continue to see him develop, his abilities, his abilities in the Force?
I love the fact that they dropped that he'd been training.
I know, that is really interesting.
Which means, how did he get out of the initial, whether it was a slaughter or who was training him? What happened that got him out of there? Were there others that got out? I love this idea that there may still be. Obviously, we've got another Jedi that was introduced with Oshana, so it's awesome that they're saying which is, I think, the problem with the movies. There is a bigger, wider universe with more people in it than just the Vader, the Skywalker family and those surrounding Luke Skywalker and Han Solo. And I think that's an important thing that they're doing right with The Mandalorian.
I think even in those last couple of movies that was a little bit of the problem. It was just, okay, let's get this wrapped up and move on. And they probably should have pushed that out a little bit more in those movies, but it's catch 22. But anyway, you're right. I think getting out of that silo and getting out to the rest of the universe has really kind of lit a creative fire under some people, and it's really, really cool.
All right, let's move on because that's really all I've been doing is I make time for that. I haven't had much time to watch anything else. So let's move on to, what are you reading?
Well, so I'm wrapping up the book that we were talking about last week, Somewhere You Feel Free, and the Tom Petty story. Just a great book. I really do encourage everybody to get and read that one. I'm going to dive into Is This Anything, that Seinfeld book that I bought a few weeks ago and haven't started. And then somebody just bought me they knew I was a history buff, and they just bought me a book called Texas Ranger, The Epic Life of Frank Hammer, the Man Who Killed Bonnie and Clyde. So that
wait, is that the book that was based on the Highwaymen?
Yes. So I am looking forward to getting into that. Frank Hammer, of course, is a legend in law enforcement. So I'm really looking forward to diving in. Looks like it's really well written. I read some of the reviews on it, and it looks great. So I really appreciate the person who gave that to me, and I'm looking forward to getting through those two, kind of in our off time here in the next few weeks.
Fantastic. I don't have a specific book, but just recently, my buddies and I over at the 60MW podcast, one of the shows we do is called the ABCs of Fording Ahead. And it's a positivity show. It's basically about the three of us guys. We've all had challenges in our lives, and somehow we've all overcome them and maintained or developed the tools to stay positive, even in the face of sometimes what feels like tremendous adversity. And so we felt like, and maybe that's an inspiration to others that might just want to know that, hey, you can overcome, you can battle, and here are some of the tips and things to try. And one of the things that we went into that I had to do a little research on, so I did a lot of article reading about being from folks who are life coaches. And what's amazing is the number of people out there who try to say it in their own way, but it really comes down to very similar, lists of things to do to stay positive. And we had a chance to go into those in an episode that'll drop in January of 2021. But just a couple of things that I was reading and learning along the way that I think are great for the audience on any show to just hear. If you feel like you're, especially with the new year coming up, people want to make resolutions or make changes and they want to figure out, well, what can I do? The biggest thing, almost everybody that I read getting ready for that episode, was don't go for monumental changes, whether it's monumental weight loss, monumental fitness gain, monumental money management. You can't, because it's so overwhelming and so big that you'll end up failing. You need to set up very small, achievable, incremental paths. One of the stories that we told in the podcast was, if two planes are flying side by side and they don't deviate by even a degree, they're both going to stay right next to each other for as long as they're in the air. But if you can just take one plane and only turn it just by 1 degree, that after about 5 or 6 hours, it still looks like you're staying right next to the other plane. You're like, well, we didn't move a whole lot. But then 10 hours later, you're like, it feels like we're the same, but I can't tell. Then you give it a day, then you give it a month, then you give it a year, and you're like, oh my God, that plane is way over there going in a completely different direction now. And look how far. And it's not about doing massive changes, it's about incremental changes. So things like that I thought were really cool to read about. And I would certainly, as we get close to its release, I'll remind everybody here. But it was just nice to think about that. Don't try to go for massive changes. Almost every life coach I read said, make them small, make them achievable, and make them something that you can get those successes and want to keep building, rather than try to set such a huge gain that you give up.
Yeah, and I've tried the I'm not ever eating sugar again thing. I've tried all those things and they don't work.
So
You
you
end
can't
up
do that. What you have
binging.
to do is say, hey, I usually drink 3 Cokes a day. Can I just drop it to 2? Can you
Right.
just get used to, maybe you go for a month. Okay, okay, I'm only going to drink 2. And then after a month, say, well, maybe I can reduce the size of the 2. Instead of 16-ounce bottles, I'm going to get 12-ounce bottles. You know, that's what we're talking about. And all these life coaches, all of these supposed experts, and here we are, we kind of just knew this already. We just never got, paid millions of dollars to write it and put it in a book. But
Right.
that's really the key. And same thing like with finance. I've said this before because this is how I got out of debt. A lot of people will say, well, you got to pay off the most expensive, biggest card you have because that's the one that's weighting you down. It's so hard to do when you've got a big credit card or a big bill. It's a lot easier to grab the smallest, pay it off, get it done, and then take that amount of money you were using to pay that bill off and then apply it to the next bill and snowball your way to your bills, and gives you that sense of accomplishment. And the human brain's wired for achievement. We like little rewards. We want to get that little dose of whether it's an adulation or the sugar high or whatever it is. And if you start small and get rid of the small ones, it's a lot easier then to tackle the bigger debts. And it's the same premise. Just so it's very cool to read about it. I don't have any one book or any one thing. It was more about a general overview of all these different experts weighing in on how to maybe get a new pattern for your life in 2021.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I know, all the gyms will start having the run on new members
Yep.
here in the next couple weeks, and you won't be able to get on any of the machines or anything until the new people give up and move on. So don't be that person,
No.
be the person who, you know, does a little bit every day and keeps it moving.
It's just, I mean, my wife is a personal trainer. She'll say to somebody like, how much do you walk? I don't at all. Okay. So today try to walk maybe to the end of your subdivision, with the end of your street and back. And let's just do that for a few days, because that'll be something that you can say, that's not too bad. Doesn't take too long. And then once you get used to it, now let's say, okay, now let's do it twice, or let's go to the next block or something. We've got to do it small. You didn't gain the weight fast. You didn't gain the debt fast for the most part. You probably didn't lose your muscle mass quickly. Don't expect the reverse to happen overnight.
When I was a kid, one of our neighbors he was in really bad shape. He had gone deer hunting and said he had a hard time getting to the deer stand and climbing the deer stand. So he came back from that trip and he said, I'm going to walk 5 mailboxes and back. And then the next day I'm going to do 6. And then, and he started building and building, and he got to where he was running 10K road races. But it all started with that first thing of, I'm putting my shoes on, I'm putting my shorts on, and I'm going to go walk down the street 5 mailboxes and walk back.
Yep.
And
Yep.
if you don't start, you'll never get to where you need to be. And I'm
here's
preaching to myself as much as I'm preaching to anybody.
Here's the crazy thing about the human brain. We then try to tell ourselves, well, that's really not doing anything. No, it is. You're changing your travel by 1 degree, and it's going to take a while to notice the difference. But if you stay on that 1 degree, you can stick with it, and it ends up being a lot better in the long run.
Yeah, it really does. Something is better than nothing.
All right. So enough of that. Enough preaching. You can come listen to the episode when it comes out in January. So
exactly.
Let's get to what you're listening to.
2 things real quick. This Means Something podcast, which is the Close Encounters Minute podcast, has just started dropping some of their episodes, and it is a really great podcast. If you're a fan of the movie Close Encounters, or just old 70s movies, 2 hosts are really insightful and fun. I actually am the guest for 3 episodes coming up, probably in about 3 weeks. Alan, I think they've talked to you, or going to talk to you about doing some episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And it is both of the hosts are experienced movie by minute folks, so I think everybody would really enjoy that. That again is This Means Something, or the Close Encounters Minute.
Excellent. That is a great movie, and if you haven't gone back to visit it, the fact that even the visuals still kind of hold up to this day, let alone the story, it's a great early Spielberg flick.
Yeah, it really is. And there are a couple things in it that I kind of scratch my head and I'm like, how did I miss this? Or how was this, whatever. In the scene, one of the scenes that I get, I missed a huge thing that we end up talking about. And that is a particular light going across the sky in one of the scenes. And so it really is a fun podcast to listen to, great movie to revisit. And it's one of those that, Terry Garr's in it too, our,
she plays the wife.
Yeah, she does. So it'll be interesting to hear from people who watch it, whether they come back and say, yeah, I love it as much as I did, or boy, there were a couple of parts in it that I'm not as thrilled with, or how people take it. But I would highly recommend This Means Something, Close Encounters Minute.
Excellent. This Means Something. So we'll throw that in there. What else? Anybody else that we want to put on there for the listening?
Well, I'm just kind of trying everything, but I'll kind of reiterate our guest for this evening, Radio Labyrinth. I try to listen to them just about every week, and it is a great podcast, fun group of people. They have some great guests, and the interviews are always entertaining. There have been some that I didn't even know who the person was, and by the end of it, I'm looking them up online. I'm like, okay, what have they done? What can I see them in? So Radio Labyrinth is always a favorite of mine. I actually even support their show on Patreon. So if you know me, I don't throw money around. So that's a ringing endorsement for them just in and of itself.
Yeah, they're definitely on my list. I'm going to get my podcast list shout out here as soon as we wrap up with you, but they are always folks that we love to support and drive people to. It is a not safe for work, but if you're an adult and you're listening, you're going to enjoy, especially if you're a Gen Xer or you grew up in that era, you're going to have a lot of fun.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
All right. Is that it?
That is it.
All right, then let me go ahead and give our podcast shout outs. One I've got to give right at the top. I mentioned the show that's going to come out next month on the podcast 60MW, but there was one that just dropped this past week, the Rant Show. It's one that I get to host, and it was me, Adam Perry, and Chris Jellyman, and we were ranting about all things from that person who you work with that manages to skate and do nothing, and they don't fire him, but Lord knows if you try to get away with it, you'd get fired. So there's always that person that we all can recognize. Recognize about some of the habits of our kids, that they don't grow up until they have to get out of the house, and then they find that you.
Sorry, yes, I don't know why that made any noise. Oh, I do, because she was trying to FaceTime me. That's my daughter Caroline, so I hope she's embarrassed.
Okay, well, we'll wrap this up. But we make fun. I say make fun of. We riff on or rant about all things kids that can't wear the same color socks like our girls did growing up, to Adam has a problem with old people who demand you respect them simply because they're old, to cyclists on the roadway, people riding those bicycles that take up the road and feel like they get to own the road, not you and your car. So those are the kinds of things that we talk about in the Rant Show. And we always wrap up playing a game of Would You Rather. I always come up with brand new, unique questions to ask of, would you rather do this or would you rather do that? And see what they say. And then there's plenty of outtakes with that kind of show. So check that out. That's the podcast 60MW. There's a bunch of shows underneath it. Got to give shout outs to our buddy BK on the air with his Escape Pod podcast. Our other friends, Golden Pat, Pat from the Golden Rage of Television on YouTube. Yes. Check that out. Or Golden Rage of TV. The Marine Corps Movie Minute, the Real Queens of Queens. They had a show drop just a few weeks back, getting ready for the holidays. Bad Cop Show. They've been absent, but you can always go back and check some of their older stuff. A very irreverent and very not safe for work podcast, but a lot of fun. Geek to Me Radio. We've got the Indiana Jones podcast. We've got the Going the Distance Rocky podcast. Got to give them a shout out. The Slycast, Worst of the Best, Radio Labyrinth, and Rocky Minute.
All great shows.
They are all in my subscribe, and whenever a new one drops, I make sure I listen to it. I get those periods when the one good thing about having the honeydew list is I get to put the earbuds in, shut out the world, and mutter to myself and pretend that nobody hears me bitching about the work I'm doing while I listen to other people chat and entertain me.
Yeah, I kind of the only thing I don't like about winter is I don't get to cut grass, and grass cutting is a great time for me to catch up on a lot of these podcasts. So
try installing hardwood.
Yeah, I bet you have plenty of time.
Oh, it's like 3 hours of nothing but listening bliss.
Oh, awesome.
So, all right. Well, as we wrap up, Walt, I always kick it over to you. Let folks know that might be listening for the very first time. They've been fans of Tim Andrews. They wanted to learn a little bit more about him, and now they're learning a little bit more about us in the meantime. How do they get in touch with us or become part of our listeners group?
The two places we always send you are facebook.com/thewilderride. There you can follow us, and then the button will pop up for you to join our listeners group. Great thing about the listeners group is no politics, no COVID, no nothing like that. Just entertainment, some good memes, some good articles related to the entertainment world. A lot of great discussions that go on there. So check that out. Or you can go to our website, which is thewilderride.com. You'll find bios and all the great About Us stuff, and then past episodes there, which include season 1 and 2, where we broke down Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles 1 minute of the movie at a time. And that will give you more hours of Wilder Ride listening than you could possibly stand, but it's great stuff. And a lot
at least fun. They don't go stale.
That is true. They will never go stale. And 2 great movies, 2 iconic movies, tons of guests, including Tim Andrews and Jeff and those guys. So check that out. Again, that's thewilderride.com and facebook.com/thewilderride. Also, if you'd like to help us out a little bit, you can always help us out on Patreon. And you can find us on Patreon as The Wilder Ride. And if you could even throw us just $1 or $2 a month, that would be a huge help. We have some expenses with storage and maintaining our website and things like that. So if you want to help us out there, that would be greatly appreciated. Check that out if you have a couple of dollars you want to throw our way.
And come back next week. I believe this is the last guest coming up next week as we get to take some time off for the holidays.
That's right. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to next week. We have a great guest, a member of the Canadian Navy, who is also a Rocky Balboa and Sylvester Stallone aficionado. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I was a podcaster, someone who gets into music podcasts, Rocky podcasts, but also serves in the Canadian Navy. It's going to be a lot of fun. Me being an ex-Navy guy in the U.S. Navy to talk to our friends in the Great White North. And of course, half my family immigrated to the United States from Canada. So I've got a great affinity for where my people come from, if you will.
Well, and I love hockey and Canadian bacon. So we've got a lot going there. So
all right. So that'll be next week, the wrap up for the season. So please come on back for another brand new edition of the Wilder Ride Listeners Lounge. The only thing that we didn't get Tim to do was some of his voices.
I know. I was kind of sad that we didn't have time for that. But
I think he was at that point where he was just kind of tired and didn't want to give them, the just performance that they deserve.
Yes, I can understand. And it sounds like he had what everybody else has going around in that throat.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a cold bug, and of course, in the middle of COVID, everybody freaks out if you get the sniffles or a cough. I had some issues because I was cleaning a bunch of stuff and got a bunch of dust in my throat, and you get that kind of tickle for about a day. So, okay,
That's when you should be wearing a mask.
My wife said